Tom's loving it.
We have Damian King asking, how do you determine whether or not a kilt is vintage? And why is vintage Highland wear so uncommon?
We could make a joke about this easily. But I don't know if you want to do a joke or a serious answer.
Why is vintage Highland wear so uncommon? It's... Again, I'll go back to eBay. You can find stuff on eBay for vintage stuff. It's clothing. Eventually, it will wear out. A lot of it just gets given to secondhand stores, and a lot of people don't, in secondhand stores, staff don't know what they have. So a man's kilt will end up in the women's section because they just think it's a skirt. Or a man's, Argyle jacket will end up with the regular suit jackets because they don't know what it is. They're like, it's weirdly short, so here, I'll put it over here. Yeah. Because they're not educated like you guys are educated, like we're educated on this stuff. It may be easier to find in Scotland than it is here because it's more in the ethos. They more understand it. Yeah. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's necessarily too hard.
It depends on where you are. I was talking to a gentleman a while back. Actually, it was one of our ambassadors, if I recall, who had said that he had the good fortune when he was getting started to be living in Canada. And he was able to find kilts in thrift stores. A fair number of them were former military, but he was able to find used kilts in thrift stores because they're more commonly worn up there. I think to some degree, so it definitely depends on where you are. In the UK, there's going to be more. In Canada, there's going to be more. In the US, less. I think there's also an issue of volume because we're still dealing with the fact that serial kilters are kind of a newer phenomenon. Traditionally, you had one or two, and you wore it all your life, so it was never going to go to a thrift store until you're dead. You get it basically like the cliche is that you get a kilt for your wedding, or first communion maybe, if you're really young and go through more than one in Scotland. Wedding, wear it for the rest of your life, maybe get buried in it. So there's not going to be as many showing up in the cycle of thrift stores as you might think.
Or pass it down through the family.
Or sometimes pass it down through the family if it's in good enough condition.
Yeah.
But this is also, but he makes a good point because this is also why when you find some of the specimens that they have, they're invaluable. Like we talked about last month, we talked about the Kingusi kilt, which is actually part of a whole kilt suit, and that was such a find because it was very unique, and it was a survival from early 19th century. It's just kind of like, whoa, we don't have that much. So even as recent history as that, you don't have as many examples as you'd like.
And it was in good condition because it was stored in a trunk, I believe.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Completely lost my thought. But yeah, it's. I like a lot of the vintage. I feel your pain. I like a lot of vintage style, and it is absolutely making its way back around again. The Duke of Rothesay, Prince Charles, like a lot of his elements of his outfit are old-timey, like classic traditional looks to them. So a lot of, like, we have our Rothesay sporran. We have a few sporrans that are inspired by traditional sporrans. We have some jackets that are kind of inspired by that. So yes, it's all coming back around. It is difficult to find original versions of the things, but I think in the next few years, you're going to see it kind of evolve a little bit and become cyclical and start having more traditionally inspired, brand new versions of the thing.
And of course, thanks to all of us people like 30 years from now will be finding lots of kilts in the thrift stores. Kilts have not been as ubiquitous as disposable fashion has been for the past 100 years. Yeah. So you just don't see as many examples of it.
Agreed.
Yes.
I also think it depends on what, like, the circles you're in. Like, so for like military, like, I see a lot of that. I see more Highland stuff in that aspect where you're getting badges, you're getting all the whole gamut of stuff, even kilts. You're seeing a lot more of that headwear stuff. It's so.
You're talking for sale?
Yeah, I'm just saying. It depends on where you're looking. You're gonna find it, but it's if you're going into your regular thrift shop, it's gonna be a real hunt and peck in there. Where if you're going to like something more like a military show, you're gonna see a lot more of that stuff.
Yeah, or high-end auctions will often have like old-timey high-end
auctioneers on eBay.
Yes,
antique dealers.
Richard Cook, guy from X Marks, he has like an uncanny knack to find beautiful old sporrans, old cantles. That's another thing you can do, is look for old cantles and try to find someone who's going to rebag it or just put a new bag on the sporran. The other trick, so to speak, is look for things that it's not. So like plaid tartan skirt or Scottish skirt, things like that, because people who are trying to sell the vintage things don't know what they have and don't know how to accurately describe it. So you have to look for ancillary ways to describe the thing, to search for the thing. Or tweed jacket. You may just want to look for tweed jacket, not a tweed kilt jacket. So it's a lot of digging. You're a historical digger guy. What am I looking at?
Picker?
Yeah, there you go.
Archaeologist,
thank you.
But no, he just responded again. But he's asking, is there any visible variations between a vintage kilt and something we would have now? So
that's like a.
It was like a two-parter
different
type thing.
Question, didn't you? And we totally just went past that.
Went with the second part.
Yep.
Well, that's a construction thing. That's more over to you two. Why don't you guys answer that?
Yes. Hand sewn, not machine sewn.
Different closure methods.
Different closure methods depending on how old the kilt is.
Yep.
Different amount of yardage depending on how old the kilt is. Different lining or lack of lining depending on how old the kilt is.
Less attention to lining up things in the back.
Yep. Less attention to the pleating. So yes, depending on the age of the kilt or the age you're looking for, yes, there are different variations. I mean, like a kilt has gone through an evolution from the great kilt where it's just literally a length of cloth up through a very, very highly tailored garment using current construction methods. So there's a lot of steps in between to get to where we are now. So it's one of those where, Mac, do you have any thoughts on anything I'm missing as far as the closure system, the buckle, or types of straps and buckles, the width of the straps and buckles?
It could usually be two-prong, would be the older style.
Right.
The canvas.
But yeah, potentially you could have either a tartan, like we saw some examples from that place in Philadelphia that was like early 1900s. They used tartan scraps as straps instead of leather.
I remember that.
Usually a white lining is usually another good key.
Yep.
And that could be a white it could be white anything. It was just usually a little bit taller, like lengthwise.
Yeah.
Even though people were shorter.
Rise is a little bit
were
higher.
Longer a little bit. Yeah.
Even the color, I'd say the color. Some of the dyes are a little bit
bolder now.
Yeah. But once you see one, you'll get the feel for what the rest of them should look like.
Yeah, there's a lot of things you can play with it, and you can have historical, remake historical kilts based on your exact specs, what you want in your kilt. But yeah, there's a lot of variation over the entire evolution of the garment. Does that make sense?
Gentlemen, it is not for ourselves or for you that we ask of this, but for the good of the country, for the good of the regiment. Be sure to subscribe, be sure to like this video, be sure to activate your thumbs up, and by all means, and with all Godspeed, check the videos to my left for further content.